Hi friends, hello, happy Thursday. Welcome to Craft Your Joy Live. I'm Lisa Hetrick. I'm super excited to be here today. I have a really fun tutorial to share with everyone today. I know people are still popping in. It's going to be a fun one. So today I'm going to be doing a pause paint and chat. I usually do like a watercolor paint and chat or pause and paint, and I decided to kind of like put them two together. It's finally fall, sort of. I'm in Maryland and it has been raining for, it feels like the last 2 weeks. Today is the first day that the sun has been out and it's been super exciting to see it. So I see people popping in. Hi Mary, hi Rhonda, hi Judith. Oh, very exciting. Okay. Today, we're not doing a card tutorial. We are doing a watercolor tutorial. If you were on my email list, I sent some information out, and I also sent out the line art illustration for today's class. This is kind of like a class. So let's get started. Okay, today's tutorial, we are going to paint Moody Gourds because it's fall in granulating colors, and I'm going to talk about granulating watercolors, granulation, what that means. I've talked about it on many different episodes here on YouTube and Facebook, but today we're gonna like make a really fun project. So let's go ahead and dive in. All of the supplies are linked below in the description. Really minimal supplies today. I am using Daniel Smith watercolors today. You can use whatever you have in your stash if you are painting this with me live or watching or painting it at another time. But some of the colors that I'm working with today are granulating colors, which is going to make it like super, super fun. So before we get started, I'm going to talk really quickly about granulation and talk about granulating colors. And I'm going to share some samples first before we get diving in. But this is what we're going to paint today. Here is the illustration that the line art illustration that I sent to everyone on my email list. So you have that. And I also sent a little bit of a list of products that I would be using. But again, you can use whatever you have. And I'm going to talk about some other products. And you might not know that you have granulating watercolors. But after today, you'll be able to look at your stash and figure out which ones are. Okay. So first, granulation. I'm going to distill this down into the simplest form because it's not that complicated. Granulation is not that complicated. Also, along the way today, if you, I should actually just probably go back to the overhead cam. If you have any questions along the way, just put question in the chat. My chat's over here and I will see it and I will answer it along the way. But let's just dive into granulation and a really quick explanation of what it is. So granulation is a watercolor painting technique that occurs when the pigment particles in the paint settle and into small little grainy like textures on the paper. And it creates this textured, dappled effect that adds a lot of textural and visual interest to your project. That's the simplest way to say it without getting into all the science of it. And when we're going to see it when I start to paint, but that is the simplest way to share it. It is a watercolor. It's not even necessarily a technique. It actually is a technique that occurs. That's really important. It's not that the paint is a technique. The paint can be a granulating paint, meaning that the particles will separate and do really interesting things when it hits the paper and the water. Okay, I hope that's like super easy way to think about it. And as we're painting today, it's going to become more clear what they are and how fun they are. And I thought it would be perfect to just talk about them today because it's fall. I wanted to paint these gourds, and I wanted to use some granulating colors to kind of give it that fall, moody, Halloweeny kind of feel. So, all right, let's talk about some granulating paint brands. Now, mostly every brand of watercolor out there in existence has some granulating paints or granulating colors. Most common color that you can look for in your stash is ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue in most brands tends to be a color that has some granulation properties to it. Now, there are other brands that are pretty intense about it. So they have created different products and formulations to make them granulating paints. This is one of them. This is Schmincke. They came out with a whole line of super granulating paints. And I have about 10 of them here, and I wanted to show them to you. I have 10. I think that they are up to 48, I think, that you can get. I could be wrong, but they're up to a really large number of paints that you can get. But here's an example of those colors painted out. Good morning, Catherine. Here's forest blue, forest olive, forest green, and you can see that those particles that are settled into the paper, like I had just shared with granulation, and it gives some really interesting textural effects. Often the granulating paints are usually made up of multiple pigments, 2 or 3 or 4 pigments, and when those pigments separate, you can get different kinds of colors. Now, I've talked about this before with Daniel Smith watercolors, and I'm going to use Daniel Smith today. But here is like Galaxy Violet. Look at that. There's a little bit of a magenta in there and a purple, and you can see in this particular brand how that whole granulation thing plays out. Now, Schmincke's beautiful. They are beautiful, beautiful paints. Their granulating paints are really, really nice. Does that mean you need to run out and get them to get granulation? No, it doesn't. It means you probably already have some in your stash that you can achieve this kind of granulation. Today, I'm using Daniel Smith. Okay, I love Daniel Smith watercolors. I've used them in the past. I've shared this palette before. I have a lot of tubes. I like to work from tubes, and I like to work from pans. This is a pan set that I set up myself of some of my favorite Daniel Smith watercolors. I don't have every single Daniel Smith watercolor. I think there's like there's a lot. There's like over 200. Do you need that many watercolors? No. If you want them, sure, get them. But that's a lot of watercolors. And you may not use them all. So this is just one of the sets that I've set up in pan sets that has a couple granulating colors in here. Green Apatite Genuine, Serpentine Genuine. A lot of the Daniel Smith watercolors from their Primatech line are granulating colors. But here are 3 of my favorite granulating colors from Daniel Smith that we're going to use. Cascade Green. I've talked about Cascade Green many times, and we've used Cascade Green on this channel, and it's made up of 2 pigments. And what happens with this color, oh, look at it. It's just so amazing what happens with it. Lunar Blue is another color, and Moonglow is another color. These 3 are granulating, and this one, Quinacridone Deep Gold, that I'm using is not granulating, but that's okay. That's going to be my orangey color that we're going to use today. Now, let's go ahead and dive in, because there's nothing like experimenting with granulating colors and diving in and doing some techniques. Here's one other brand I wanted to bring in. White Nights has come out with, White Nights and Rosa Gallery have come out with like their own line of granulating watercolors. You can see that this particular brand of granulating watercolors seems to have like black added into a lot of the colors to create that granulation. I do like this set, but I kind of like this set for more of like moody moons and galaxy-like kind of things. But when I'm thinking about my greens and thinking about like those kind of moody greens or sea life greens, I tend to lean towards Daniel Smith for that. Hello, Reva. Reva's secretly watching while I'm working. That's cool. Okay, let's dive in. Today, the supplies, like I said, are listed down below. I printed out my line art illustration on Arsha's paper. This is just a pad of paper, and I ran it through my printer. And I actually got some schmutz on it right before we went live, but we're going to paint over that. But remember, you could use your Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor if you wanted to do that. Now, if you received this in your email and you want to, there are a couple different ways. You can print out the illustration on a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, and then I've provided the lines where you can cut it out. Or you can take the illustration, take your paper, hold it up to a window where the sun is coming in, and you can trace it onto your watercolor paper. Or if you have a light box, you could use, there's a couple different ways to do that. Now, brush-wise today, I'm using a number 10 round, this Princeton Aqua Elite, or I might end up using my Princeton Heritage. So I've got those sitting over here on this side as well. Let's dive in and talk about this and get going on some painting. So we're going to do a lot of different techniques today. We're going to do mostly wet into wet. I've got some scratch paper here so that we can talk about colors along the way. I see that my face is kind of in the way, but here is the sample. I'm going to pop the sample up here. We're going to do some wet into wet techniques. We're going to do some wet into dry. We're just going to have a little paint, a little chat, and kind of have some fun with it. I'm going to take my paint, Cascade Green, and I'm just going to put like a little dollop. Ooh, that's quite a big dollop. I was going to put it on my glass, but I have a big habit of running my paper into things. So I'm just going to take a little bit and put a little dollop. That's the Quinacridone Deep Gold. I really love that color. Look at that. It's so pretty. Lunar Blue is going to be our finishing color, but let's do Moonglow. Moonglow in the Daniel Smith line is one of my favorites. Da Vinci has another version of it as well using the same pigments, and I will try to remember what that one is, but love it, love it. All right, Moonglow, let's dive in. All right, so what I'm going to do first is we're going to start with, I got a little bit of schmutz here. We're going to start right here. We might run over an hour today, friends, but I'm going to really try hard to get it in within the hour, especially for those who are watching during their lunch. All right, my brush is wet, my paper is dry. And what I'm going to do is just kind of focus in. I've got this illustration here. And on the one that I sent you, the lines will be much lighter. I kind of darkened my lines up a little bit so that we could see them on the camera. But I'm not too worried about them because I am going to end up covering them up with paint. But I am going to work for this big honkin' piece right here. I am going to work one little gourd slice at a time. We're going to start off with some Cascade Green. Let's get that in the frame here because I really want you to see how beautiful this color is, this granulating color as it separates. Also, so I'm going to drop it in. I'm going to let it do its thing. One of the beautiful things about Daniel Smith watercolors is how beautiful they are, how bright they are, like right at the gate, out of the gate. And they do run. They don't run. They don't whoosh as much as like a core watercolor does. But they do run very nicely. And I'm just going to coax this around a little bit, around my edges. And look at that, how it's just running there. Love that. Wet into wet. But I want you to start to see, and I might need to kind of pop in a little tighter. Just a little bit. You can start to see some of the colors. So here's the green, right? And look at some of that blue that's separating, that's starting to happen with the watercolor, with Cascade Green. I absolutely love it. Cascade, you can see it happening around here, and there's granulation already starting to happen. Oh, I'm getting so excited that I'm starting to get it all around. So what I have found with working with granulating colors, I'm going to take my face off since I'm kind of, we've got our reference here, and I'm kind of looking down quite a bit now. So I've got like this first layer in here. You can start to see how the color is separating. You can see the green, and you can see that turquoise blue coming through. Our pigments here are PBR7 and oh my goodness, my eyes. It's PB15, yeah. So it's like a phthalo blue and the PBR. Oh my goodness, look at that. I just love this. I love it, love it, love it. I'm just getting my first layer in here. I'm going to come over here. Now this was wet into wet. Now I'm going to come over here and just kind of do like a wet into dry. My brush is wet, my paper's dry. This Princeton Elite, I really do like these brushes because look at the point on that brush. It comes to a really nice fine point when it's wet. So I've got a lot of color there, cleaning off my brush. And then I'm just going to go ahead and use what's here so that we can kind of see the difference of what's happening. Wet into dry, not as much granulation happening, right? Because I'm not letting, it isn't such a big wet wash of color. Granulation happens when the water in the wash that you're doing here, the water and the pigments and the particles start to settle. So the pigments start to move with the water. So wet into wet techniques are brilliant techniques to use for taking full advantage of the granulation that can happen with your paint. Woo! Felt myself nerd out there. Okay, now I'm going to go in. Look at this turquoise that's happening. I love, anybody ever seen, well, I'm sure you have. I love the gourds that happen in the fall that have those green and blue colors in them. They're just so beautiful, and they feel like a little bit otherworldly. I'm doing a little bit of wet into wet here. You can see I'm just painting wet wash of color, just water on this slice of the gourd. Some of the colors coming over, and you can see what color it is. It's blue. You can see that blue. Look at that separation happening right here. Cascade Green is like, oh, it's a magical color. It's a magical color. I love it so much. I'm just kind of coaxing this color around a little bit, going into the areas here. I feel like with granulating colors too, when you're painting with them, you don't have to do, I'm going to turn my paper a little bit. You don't have to work so hard to get some of the texture effects. You actually don't have to work at all to get some of the texture effects from the granulation. You just let the water and the colors do their thing. We're going to go back in and we're going to add more over top, but a little bit while it's wet here. I'm just going to let it do its thing. Ah! I'm already digging it. All right, let's come over here to this little slice. And then the problems of being a lefty. Right? I'm constantly moving my paper around. All right, let's do a little bit more wet into wet. So a little bit of paint and chat while I'm doing the wet into wet. We're going to chat along the way. Holy smokes, friends, it's October. Did September not just zip on by? It was an incredibly busy month. It was a wonderful month, but it was an incredibly busy month that zipped on by. We had a lot of activity here in the Hetrick household. My daughter turned 21. Holy smokes. Feels like I just gave birth, but she turned 21. Yeah, a lot of activity happened here over the summer. I'm just coaxing this around a little bit and letting it do its thing. Now look at some of that blue right here, and you can see some of those little tiny particles of separation in that Cascade Green happening right there. I just love it. Hi, Edie. Edie just popped in. Hello, everyone. We've got all kinds of friends popping in. Very, very cool. All right, I'm going to let this be. Look at that. I got a little bit of a bloom happening here, too, which is kind of fun. I'm going to let this be, and I'm going to move on to my Moonglow. Now, let's go ahead and do the Quinacridone Deep Gold. Let's do that one. Got a lot of friends here with us today. You never know when I start to do the paint and chats how many people are going to come, because sometimes we do paper crafting. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I want to get my brush clean, and I'm going to come in. Actually, I'm going to do wet into dry. My paper's dry, my brush is wet, and I'm going to pick up some of this Quinacridone Deep Gold, which is just delicious color. And I'm going to come in, and I've got like probably a 2% milk strength here. You can see that there's quite a bit of water. There's pigment here, and I'm just kind of slopping some color in here. Clean off my brush, and then just use what's here and kind of move it around. And right now we're just getting that first layer of color in. We're going to end up coming over all of the things that I've painted, going over it and adding more detail along the way, letting some colors bleed and blend together. You can notice that with the wet into dry, I'm kind of doing a lot of work here, right? I'm moving that color around, getting that first layer. I'm intentionally leaving some whites of the paper. Let some of those whites of the paper stay, because that adds a lot of visual interest as well. Also, pop in the chat if you can, if you're in a position where you can chat freely. Pop in the chat if you've ever used granulating watercolors before. I'd love to know what your experiments have been like, if you like them or you don't like them. Some people some people really don't like them at all. You can see that I'm really choked up on to the ferrule of this brush. I kind of, when I'm doing wet into dry techniques, I really do kind of choke up pretty far on the brush so that I can kind of get a little bit more control. There we go. I love this color. I'm going to go in and add just some more of this color. Also pop in the chat if you've used Daniel Smith before. You know, on this channel, I've used lots of different watercolors. And while a lot of people hone in on a brand and they really, really just kind of stick with it, I am not one of those people. I like to try all brands, but here's the thing. You really don't need to try all the brands. Once you find something that you like, don't think that the grass is greener on the other side of another brand. Usually, I also like some paints from different brands. I like colors from different brands. You can really mix mash things up and do like some separate and pick colors from different brands that you like. So I want to make sure that everybody kind of like doesn't feel like you need to keep up with anyone else as it relates to art supplies, friends. You don't ever need to keep up with anybody else. I'm going to let that go. Reva just shared, I have not used them. I struggle standing in the art supply store trying to figure out what to buy or try, and I seldom have my notes from your lives. It's even harder. Oh, wow. That's totally valid, Reva. I love going to art supply stores. In my town, my closest art supply store is Plaza Art in the Towson area, and I love that store, and I too even know what I'm looking at, and I will stand there and just kind of look at all the different colors. That particular store has the entire line of Daniel Smith, has the entire line of Winsor Newton, has like the entire line of so many different brands, and I stand there and be like, oh wow, like I want this color and I want this color, I want this color. So I can totally relate to that. And I even but that's the beauty of it. And also, Reva, I would encourage you to, if you can, in this art supply store that you're in, seek out the people that work there, especially if it's not a big box store like a Michael's or Hobby Lobby, or those big boxy stores where they don't have as many staff that are willing to help or have the knowledge base that you're looking for. I have found that when I go to art supply store, like a smaller one like Plaza or Dick Blick, or smaller ones like that, there's even smaller ones in towns all across the US. You can just ask the people that work there, and they have so much knowledge, and they're so helpful. So Catherine just shared what Edie just shared. Standing in Blick Art is like standing in a candy store. Facts. Total facts. It is, and it can be like overwhelming, and you just want like so many things. Catherine just shared, I haven't used granulating colors. I've been interested in image that I've seen that seem to be more suited for a smoother finish. But now, with the fall and these types of images, I'm listening intently. Gorgeous. Yes. So that's funny. Edie, standing in the Blick Art. So when I go to an art supply store, and I do not like to be rushed, so I usually go by myself or with my daughter, and I like to go up and down every single aisle, even though I may not be purchasing something from that aisle. I want to look at all of it. So it's kind of fun. Cheryl just shared, I've used Daniel Smith dot cards and just ordered a few tubes. I love you like the colors. You will not be disappointed, Cheryl. Daniel Smith is an amazing line of colors. It's an amazing line. I'm getting some things off my screen. Sorry about that. An amazing line of watercolors. They're made in Seattle. They have a lot. They seem to be they're very popular. People know about them. And they're easy to access for the most part. And I love them. But I feel like when you're getting started in watercolors and you're ready to move to a professional line of watercolors, I've shared this many times. Some of my top favorites are Daniel Smith, Winsor Newton, Da Vinci. Those are probably the top three. I've been using the tonic ones lately. Like, a professional watercolor kind of changes the game for you. So Mary said, I agree with Reva. Reva said it's a small art supply store and they're very knowledgeable, but I always feel like I don't belong. Oh, you should not feel that way, Reva. You shouldn't feel that way. Just go in there loud and proud, friend, and ask for some help. Oh, yes. I think I remember you telling me this before. Your boss is a very accomplished watercolor artist, but wants me to get stuff way out of my talent level. That's not true, Reva. That's not true. Not out of your talent level. She's probably encouraging you, he or she, because I'm not sure, probably encouraging you to get supplies that are a little bit more on the professional side so that you'll have better results. So if you have good paper, you're not fighting with your paper. This is a really good 100% cotton paper that we're using today. If you're using good paints, you're not fighting with your paints. You'll get better results when you're first starting things out, and you'll be able to improve along the way. So then maybe that's what he or she was thinking. Yeah, Judith said I shop by myself. I always feel like I come home to myself when I'm in an art supply store. Oh, Edie, I feel the same way. I totally feel the same way. All right, let's dive into Moonglow here. Oh, I love everything that everybody's saying in the chat. Now, Moonglow. Oh, Moonglow. Moonglow, I love Moonglow. Moonglow is a multi-pigment. This one has 3 pigments. PG, you see me squinting? PG18, PB29, and PR177. We're going to do a wet into wet technique with this gourd. You're right, Reva. When you buy a little bit, I always say with watercolors, start off with what fits your budget. And that's why I've shared like lots of different techniques and tutorials on the channel showing Winsor Newton Cotman, Paul Rubens watercolors, that those are some watercolors that are considered student grade. And I really don't love those words, but they are just paints that have less pigment in them, so they're less expensive. But when you're getting started in watercolor, if those kinds of watercolors fit your budget, you do it. And then you practice your techniques. And when you're ready to move up to a next level, you start to like replace some of your older colors with a professional tube. Bye, Edie. All right. I am going to use the Moonglow, and I'm dropping in some of the Moonglow in the wet into wet areas. You can see that the Moonglow is a little less whooshy. A little less whooshy. Oh boy. Okay. My daughter was texting and I was just checking. Real time, friends. She's at work and had a question, so I'll answer it in a bit. Okay, I'm moving that Moonglow around, cleaning off my brush a little bit. Brush is wet. Paper's wet. I'm just going to move what's here around. Reva just shared, I tend to move towards student grade for paints and brushes. That's totally okay, Reva, until you, and I talk about that. If you go back on, take a peek at my channel, I have shared many tutorials. We're doing wet into wet for the rest of this gourd. Many tutorials where I've shared Winsor Newton Cotman paints. I've shared other student brand paints. Oh my goodness, friends, look at the color. Look at Moonglow. You get some of that purple. You get some of the blues popping out of here. You know, on this channel also, when we've done our card videos and I've used the Gina K inks and I've showed you how the ink properties will separate and you'll see different colors. So kind of like a granulation technique happening with some of the Gina K inks, just a little bit different. They're ink and actually they're dyes, where these watercolors are pigment. Oh my gosh, Moonglow is so moody. I love it. Reva just shared, when you actually share dry to dry and wet to wet, it is so very helpful. That's great. I like to try, when I'm doing a technique, I like to kind of call it out before I start to do it. And then it becomes second nature to you. So again, I'm going in with some wet into wet. Brush is wet with clean water. Now it's going to lift some of the water here on the side. It's going to lift some of the paint. It's just going to start bringing it across. Oh my goodness, Moonglow. Moonglow, you're so pretty. And notice how the paint is not going outside that line, because watercolor only goes where the water is. If there's no water for it to travel to, it won't go there. So keep that in mind. Look at what's happening here. You can see the granulation and the settling grains of pigment. Moonglow is probably one of the biggest colors. One of the colors, Moonglow, I would say, and Cascade Green, Serpentine. Now I'm thinking of a bunch of them. Serpentine Genuine, like there are quite a bit of colors in the Daniel Smith line that will show you immediately how they granulate when you start to use them. Now I'm just dropping in a little bit of this color. I love these colors, these purple. Now, I'm not entirely sure that there's really a purple gourd out there, but there is in this painting. So we're going to let it fly. We're going to let it fly. All right, I'm cleaning off my brush. I kind of want to bring it over look at the colors. See how they're separating? And you can see all of the different colors that are happening. Love it. Okay. Now, I'm going to let this dry, and I'm going to start to come back. We're going to end up doing probably 2 or 3 layers here. Let's go back to our Cascade Green. Yes, Reva just shared I do use dye-based inks for watercolor. You should. It is cost effective, especially if you already have them in your stamping stash. Use them. Practice some of these techniques, wet into wet, wet into dry. And then you'll know, once you like kind of master the concept of wet into dry, the technique, then you just change the medium that you're using. Change the watercolor brand that you're using and do the same technique, and then you'll get different results. So every medium is going to give you a different kind of look, but the base technique stays the same. Okay, I'm going to do some wet into dry. Paper's dry here, brush is wet, full of Cascade Green pigment. And I'm going to come back and just start to put in some of my darker colors here. I'm just going to follow the lines that I have. I actually want to come all the way across and down and just kind of follow the lines that I have here and go all the way around. This tip of this brush is really helpful for that. Just do a little bit of feathering up there. Clean off my brush. So I'm just getting water, and then I'm just going to feather out what's here. Just kind of soften those harsh lines and just use what's here to kind of feather it out and across to the inside. I want to leave a little bit of white and just let the watercolor do its thing. We're going to do the same thing over here. So we started off with this gourd with wet into wet. Now we're doing dry into wet. And this technique right now is called glazing or layering. So when we layer another layer of watercolor, could be the same color, could be a different color, over top of what we've already done, it starts to bring up the luminosity. So my brush is clean. And now I'm just going to go in with the brush, just kind of feather out some of that color. Just feather it out. And what I'm just trying to do here is I'm not focusing on where's the light and where's the thing. I'm just trying to bring our image a little bit more to life and give it some of that texture popping up. While I'm doing this, I'm going to take a little bit of the gold, kind of pop some of that gold in there and let it do its thing. Let it mix. While that gold mixes in with that Cascade Green, we're starting to get like another kind of green because we've got gold. We'll do a little color mixing here so I can show you. I've got that Cascade Green right here. If I take a little bit of that gold and pop it over top, I'm getting another green. You get a different green. Oh, that's such a it's sort of more like a leafy green. Love that. Motorcycle just went by. Okay. So we're mixing colors right on the paper instead of mixing it down here. The paper's wet. it's starting to dry a little bit, and you drop in a different color and you can create some different effects. I love it. Okay, now I'm going to come in. My brush is clean again. Paper is dry, so wet into dry. I'm going to take a little bit of that color, just kind of come around here. Riva, you had shared that your boss was an accomplished watercolor artist. That's amazing. Sometimes I just want to point out that there are lots of different watercolor artists that do lots of different things. That, you know, paint flowers, paint landscapes, have different techniques, have more of purist values of things. They use one kind of brand of watercolor and only that brand. So don't let some of the structure or rules that might exist within another person's hobby or within another person's the way they do things stop you from finding your own way and finding the things that you like to do. Oh, I'm digging it. I'm just digging the way that goes. Love it. So hopefully that is encouraging. I have told this story on this channel before of when I had submitted my work to be in a gallery, the Members Art Gallery here locally at our Carroll Arts Center. And I met an incredibly accomplished watercolor landscape artist. She was amazing. Like, her work was glowy. And we didn't have the very best conversation. She kind of snubbed me a little bit. But I just kind of took it as like, hey, it's kind of cool because there's more than one way to approach your art, approach the thing that brings you joy. This channel is named Craft Your Joy. There's a reason why. It isn't always about crafting or paper crafting. It's about crafting your own joy in how you want to come to the table to create. And that could be any way you want. It could be with art supplies. It could be with stamping supplies. It could be baking. It could be cooking. It could be anything. And that's what I mean by Craft Your Joy. I would love to see her work. I really, really would love to see it. Okay. I'm kind of digging the way this looks. So notice with Daniel Smith, we've done 2 layers. I'll probably do one really small layer of glazing or layering to kind of jack up that luminosity there. Love it. Yes, Craft Your Joy. Mary just shared, I love Moonglow, putting it on my list. Google said gourds do not grow in purple. I know they don't. I didn't think so. And it didn't even occur to me, Mary, this morning, that a gourd wouldn't be in purple. It didn't occur to me because I feel like it looks so natural right here. But yeah, it wouldn't have occurred to me that it didn't, because I really wanted to use Moonglow and I was going to make it happen. So again, I'm crafting my joy, right? Everything doesn't have to be realistic. We can do whatever we want. Now look at this Moonglow as it has dried, that first layer. Look at all of that granulation. Look at that, friends. Do you see the deposits of the pigments just kind of separated there? Now, Quinacridone Gold Deep Gold is not a granulating color. So we have more of a brighter, saturated look versus a lot of texture happening in here. Kind of fun. So fun. There are no purple gourds, Lisa. No purple gourds. I bet you there would be a way to make one. You know, you got eggplants, right? Yeah, eggplants. Catherine just said eggplants exist. So the color, the pigment exists. Beets kind of have a, you know, little bit of a red purpley look sometimes. Carrots do. So why gourds? Why not gourds? Okay, I'm kind of digging that. I want to, and I will look for any reason to try to use Moonglow. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of a lifting technique right here. So my brush is clean, paper is wet, and I just kind of want to bring back some of the highlight of the paper. Now, Moonglow, so see how I'm just able to pull some of that color away to bring back some of that white? I'm going to do a little bit over here too, just up into that, just to bring back some of that white. So already we're starting to get that feeling of this piece coming to light a little bit, a little more 3D. It also is revealing some of those colors underneath from that first layer. And Moonglow is a staining pigment, so when you're painting with it, it does stain the paper, but you do have quite a bit of opportunity here to kind of get something going. Love it. I'm getting really excited here. All right, I want to add a little bit more, another layer of the Quinacridone Deep Gold. This is, I just love this color from Daniel Smith. Okay, brush is wet, paper's dry. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to add, really just add my lines in around the gourd. Now, I'm probably not going to be able to get rid of the lines that are happening, clean off my brush from the paper, from the illustration, but that's okay. Now, right now, my brush is dry, and I'm just kind of dry brushing down some of this color. Just kind of let it do its thing here. I want to add a little bit more to the top. Just brush is really kind of dry. There's not a lot of water on here. And it's kind of allowing me to kind of come in and add a little bit of more defined lines. Okay, cool, digging it. Now, while this is kind of drying, I do need to use Green Apatite Genuine. I need to bring in another green to do our stems. So I'm going to do our stems. Eh, who knew? Look at what happened over here. I hit it and it mixed. Let's see what that looks like. That little bit of Cascade Green came in and mixed with that Quinacridone Gold Deep. Where is, here, let's see what that looks like now that that mixed. Looks like one of the other greens. Looks a lot like this Serpentine Genuine. One of the cool things about the granulating colors, and a lot of Daniel Smith colors too, is the opportunities you have to just experiment, nerd out, play around, and see what happens when things get mixed together on your palette. You often get a little bit of interesting things. All right, this is Green Apatite. Yeah, Green Apatite Genuine. I'm just going to paint this out so that you can see it. It's a beautiful, I'm going to say like a mineral green. But when it separates, the brown tones in it come out. It's got two, it's Pigment Green Apatite, Genuine Green Apatite, which is a mineral. So you can see some of those pigments that are settling. Those granules are settling into the paper. Ah, I love it. We're going to use it straight up for the stems. We're going to paint the stems in wet into dry. Paper's dry, brush is wet. I'm going to lift up some of the pigment, and I'm going to go all ham, 100% full on whole milky milk, and just come in and just kind of follow the lines in my illustration. I'm really choked up on the brush and just kind of using the tip and outlining. And I'm going to bring some of that color down, clean off my brush, get it really nice and dry, just the tip of it a little bit wet, and kind of pull that color down and around. So very, very nice. Okay. Now I'm going to take my brush, it's clean, I'm going to lift some up and away. Reeve said the green gourd is really stunning. It is! That's a Cascade Green. And like I said, if you just try a few colors. Look, we're only using 4 colors and we're creating this really big, very large, well, this is a 5x7, large, beautiful painting. Look at these. Oh, look at that color. And you don't need a lot. You just need to play around and give yourself permission to kind of experiment with what you have. And also I have found, like yesterday when I was painting this, I had this idea in my head, wasn't sure how it was going to play out, knew that I had done an illustration. So last year in my Gina K line, I have a stamp with this stamp. So I knew that I had done a gourd illustration before and I wanted to do a gourd. In my stamp set in my Gina K line, it's called Grace and Gratitude. The stamp is still available. I've got the gourds and the pattern gourd. I'm just going to lift my brush here and just take a little bit of that color out. So I went back and looked at the original illustration I did, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to resize that illustration and we're going to paint. I had this idea in my head, and I want it to be with some granulating colors. I want to create this moody kind of feel. So what are 3 colors that I can use that are going to give me 3 or 4, right? Because I'm using a different one for the stem, that are going to give me this moody, moody feel. And that's all you really needed, right? Just a few colors. So I'm going to let that one stay the way it is. I'm going to pick up some of this green, drop some in, drop a little bit in over here, drop some here. You can see that granulation happening. Drop a little bit here and here. I'm going to let it be. Kind of schmoozed it a little bit, but let's let it be. Now, loving this color. I'm not going to be adding any more layers to this. I feel like I've got that luminosity where I want it to be. I'm curious, and I do want, see the level of intensity that I have here and here. I haven't quite achieved that here and here yet. So we're going to go back. We're going to do wet into dry again. And I'm going to lay some more of this color down right here, just kind of along the edge here. Along the edge here, just kind of following that up. Clean off my brush. Clean off my brush and just kind of use the clean brush to kind of move some of that color around. I'm adding some of that, bringing back some of that intensity, or really just trying to jack up that luminosity. Also giving myself a little bit of room, and I'm leaving that little white highlight there to drop in, to just drop in a little bit of other colors here. Catherine just shared, let's drop a little bit of that gold. I like laying on the paint and then taking, okay, laying down the paint and then taking it off to let some of the staining properties come through. That's true. That's what I did up here, right? We let that layer go in there. Then I lifted some of it off so that we could still see some of the stained paper underneath it, and you get that shadow areas. I love doing that too. I added a little bit of that Moonglow right here. I'm kind of just noodling around with some of this wet water. Wet into wet, just kind of being a little conscientious of not trying to make mud. But I got a little bit of that purple in there and I'm kind of digging it. All right, let's just make a little bit more here. We are going to run over today, friends, but we're getting close. We're getting close. All right, adding a little bit more. Now cleaning off my brush and just kind of using what's here, cleaning off my brush, feathering that color out a little bit. Get a little bit of that gold added right back in down here. And I'm just tapping it in. Oh, loving that. I'm going to preserve these whites that we see here and leave it. Just add a little bit up here. A little bit across here. Let that be. Clean off my brush and just kind of feather that down. So really, I just end up kind of going over that white area with a little bit of water. I'm going to add in a little bit of this gold. And let that gold kind of mix with that Cascade Green to create a little bit of a different green. And it could also be kind of like a highlight, kind of like the sun is kind of on that part of the gourd. It can be whatever you want it to be. It can be moody. It's moody. Now look at what's happening right here with that green apatite genuine. Oh, I love the way that's looking. All right. I'm going to leave that alone. Kind of liking that. I really feel like I need a little bit of a harder line. So I'm going to come in with that Cascade Green. Oh, let's get that out of there. That was my hair. Gotta love long hair. I lost that line a little bit, so I just want to add that in. Add that back in a little bit. Just move that around. Cheryl just shared a question. Do the other professional brands you have mentioned that have paints with the same name granulate the same way? That's a really great question. No, not necessarily. Now, what I have found is like Daniel Smith is a pretty predictable kind of granulation. They have a lot of paints in their Primatech line, so they make a lot of paints from minerals that naturally granulate. They Schminke have these granulating, they like specifically formulated super granulating paints. But like a Winsor Newton, the paints are a little more finely milled, the pigments, so the granulation happens, but it is a little more subtle. I have just found that like Daniel Smith Da Vinci granulation is a little more subtle. Daniel Smith is a little more day glowy and kind of in your face and gives you kind of this feel. So I know, because I know that, and I've got some of those paints, when I want to paint like that or this moody look, I know that that brand will give me those predictable results. So Cheryl, is there a brand that a specific brand that you want to know, like something that you have in your stash that you want an opinion about the granulation? So I will say like some of the, like Paul Rubens will granulate. It's pretty subtle. I'm coming in and doing the same thing that I did over here with the Moonglow. With the Moonglow. Some of our craftier paints, like what I use for more of our paper crafting projects, the Paul Rubens. White Nights is it granulates. It does have a lot of granulating properties in it. Not as much as Daniel Smith. And I would say the Rosa Gallery granulates, that paint grades. I would like I said, ultramarine blue in all brands tends to granulate. And that's what another one, cerulean blue, is another one that tends to granulate. But every brand's a little bit different. Like for example, Mission Gold's version of, I'm not liking how this is all starting to feel like one color. So I'm going to pull a little bit of that away. I love that. So that I can bring back some of those lights and get those darks. I definitely want to get some darks in there. Over here, it's probably too late for me to try to pull some light out. But I'm going to try. Nope, I'm getting a little bit out. Okay. I might need to go into my Moonglow. I don't want to pull, I want to get like a full strength bit of Moonglow, so I'm going to dip the tip of my brush right into the, let's put that down, right into the paint tube. So let me know, Cheryl, if there's something. I think, you know, one of our goals on this channel this year, and what some things that I heard from you was just from all of you, was to just kind of share just some knowledge base about different brands and why I like them and why I don't, and why I'll choose some for some things and why you'll choose some for others. But all this to say is to not make you like go out and go nuts and go crazy and buy all these different things because you think you need them, because you don't. But if you know that these granulating techniques are something that you like, you might just pick a handful of them, 2 or 3 of them from a Daniel Smith line, and then have them in your stash and use them. I mean, this is a little 5mm tube. We've used barely. We've used a little dabble of it today. I'm just going in and just kind of adding a little bit of a harsh line here. And then I don't want to putz with this a little bit. I'm going to let it go. Okay, Cheryl, I have Paul Rubens and Winsor Newton Cotman brands, and just starting with some Daniel Smith. 2 fantastic brands. Paul Rubens watercolors, I love them. I've shared them on the channel. I have many videos, Cheryl, and I know you've seen them. They have several. So their brands, a lot of their paints are single pigments, but they do have several paints that aren't single pigments, that have multiple pigments in them. Those are the ones that tend to granulate more. I know that their green granulates, their Payne's Gray granulates in Paul Rubens. Winsor Newton Cotman, there's several paints that granulate. The sap green granulates a little bit. I wouldn't say a lot. The ultramarine blue does. The cerulean blue hue does. So just now that you know what granulation is, and you have those paints, and you're experimenting a little bit with Daniel Smith, you'll see your differences. That some paints are just kind of formulated to give you this extra boost of granulation. Okay. All right, I feel like we're jacking up the mood. I got a mood here. I got a mood going here. I wanted to add a little bit of, like, little tiny bit. I should have waited for that to dry just a little bit, but a little tiny bit of glow right there. Now, we're going to do the background, and I'm going to do Lunar Blue. Do I have Lunar Blue on here? What did I do with it? Okay. Oh, there it is. It snuck away from me. Cheryl, I hope that answered your question. And try with Paul Rubens and Winsor Newton Cotman in your stash. I'm just going to start doing a little wet, just applying some wet water here. Get them out. Get the ultramarine blue out and the cerulean blue. I think Paul Rubens has a cerulean blue. Depends on which set you have. And do some washes of color, like on some paper. And then do a Paul Rubens side, and then do a Winsor Newton Cotman side. And you're going to start to see the difference in granulation. You want to make sure you have a lot of pigment on your pen, on your brush, and like a wash of color like this. Okay? All right, I am going to put down some Lunar Blue. And I'm just smooshing it down. Lunar Blue is so granulating. Look at that. Oh, I've got some water on there. I love this color. Love it. We're going to drop it in. It is super moody and super dark. I'm going to drop some in. I'm dropping a lot more in places where I want it to be dark, like right here and right up here. And then I'm just going to kind of pop around the edge here. I want a little bit more here. If you don't have Lunar Blue, You don't need Lunar Blue. You could do this with Payne's Gray. I have found that Payne's Gray is a really nice moody color in almost every brand I've ever tried it in. And the Paul Rubens Payne's Gray is really moody. Or an indigo. Like if you have an indigo color, it's going to be kind of moody. Let's just drop a little bit more right here. And I'm going to extend some of this out. One of the things I like about Daniel Smith is that it doesn't take a lot of layers of color to achieve some of the effects that you want. It doesn't take a lot of, let me get a little gray down here. You can get a lot of bang with just 2 layers of color. You're not building up a lot of color. Now, a brand, ooh, that looks like super moody, but remember, it's wet, but when it dries, it's going to dry back a little bit. Any watercolor does that. It looks like super intense when it's wet. Look at how in this wash, oh boy, we're going to nerd out. How in this wash, this particular color, Lunar Blue, look at the separation. You can see the granulation happening right before your eyes, and it's super moody. Love it. All right, I'm going to come in, and my brush is, like, my water's not clean, and that's okay. If I wanted it to be super clean, I would have had 2 glasses of water. You can see it's not clean. You know, to clean along the way. But because this painting is moody, I kind of want those colors to cohabitate together. Got a little bit happening here. I'm going to add quite a bit right here in this corner because I really want it to be moody right there. And I kind of want it to be moody over here, like super dark. Now, I woke up at 3 a.m. this morning with an idea for this painting, and this painting was already done. But that's kind of what happens with my brain. I was like, oh, I really could have taken this opportunity to talk about what's in the foreground and what's in the background and how to see how this, well, let me flip it back around. I'll talk about that in a minute. Talking about foreground and background and how to paint that in. We'll do that another time. Because I think in my mind, I was like, oh, I got all these great ideas I want to share, but I had, you know, we only get an hour. Well, we could get whatever we want, but I wanted to get my point across with the granulating colors. And what I meant by foreground and background is that, like, look, this particular gourd is closest to us. This gourd is close to us, but just gently behind it. But this gourd, you know, is probably in proportion in size to this gourd, but it's kind of floating back there. So we could create some really nice a horizon line back here so that you can see that it's back there. So that's that dimension and looking at your design, looking at your painting and creating that illusion of what's in the foreground and what's in the background. But that's for another time, friends. And let me know if you're interested in learning that kind of information. Pop it in the chat. Okay. Look at the granulation that's happening here. Look at it. See how it looks like crinkly? I'm loving that. All right, I'm going to add a little bit of color over here. And we're probably only going to do like 1 layer of the Lunar Blue because I really think that that's all we're going to need. I'm just adding a little bit of darkness around some of the edges. Just mooding it up. And then I'm going to come in. Oh boy. I'm going to come in. I've used such a little amount here. Come in and just really add a good amount of that color. I need my brush to be a little less wet. See how I'm just kind of adding some really dark, full strength versions of that color right there. Let's just add. And now I'm just blending and feathering them out. just creating a little bit of mood, a little bit of, ooh, got some really nice mood going on there. I need a little bit down here, so we're just going to add a little bit around here, a little bit here. Oh gosh, it's so cool. It's got a little Halloweeny vibe, doesn't it? Loving it. Cheryl said, yes, love learning anything you want to nerd out about. I'm a sponge. Yay! I think it would be fun if we spent some time together, friends, and did a little bit of chat about perspective and what's in the foreground and what's in the background. All right, I'm going to move this. One of the other things is when I painted this one yesterday, this was on a much larger piece of paper. And then I just felt free to like just do whatever I wanted, go outside the lines, so to speak. And then I just cut it down when it was dry. Let's go ahead and dry this up so that we can really see how moody that Lunar Blue is. And then we're going to wrap up. I'm going to flip. Oh, so nice. Loving it. I'm loving it. I'm loving the way this looks. Okay, let's talk about the granulation in that Lunar Blue. Look at that. I'm going to kind of turn it a little bit so that you can see. Look at all that. That Lunar Blue. Oh, I get so excited playing. You know, it's been a while since I've painted something. Felt like I needed to kind of practice a little bit. You get out of practice. I see a little white spot right here. I'm kind of going in. All right, I'm loving the way this looks. Here was the original. Wow, this one's moodier. They both, so see, same paper, same brush, same paints, over 2 different days, same techniques, 2 different looks. Love that. Love that. I think I would like, once this is dry, so this is dry. One more thing. This is dry. I'm going to lift up some of the Quinacridone Deep Gold. And I'm just going to add a little touch in there, just very gently, layering over. Get a little bit of that gold back. It jacked it up. Jacked up that luminosity. I love it. Okay, friends. I hope you really enjoyed today's tutorial, today's pause, paint and chat. I had a lot of fun. It's been a little while since we've done one of these little over an hour paint alongs, if you're painting along with me or painting on the replay. I hope you really enjoyed it today. I hope you got a lot of really great watercolor knowledge and you feel a little bit energized to experiment with some of the granulating colors that you might already have in your stash. So, and I hope it was helpful. All right, friends, I will be back next week. Next week, yeah, I think we're going to come back with a card paper crafting tutorial. We'll see. If you're on my email list, you'll get all that information sent to you in the email. And I do have the next Gina K release is happening on October 15th. So that's coming up as well. So I know I'll be making lots of inspiration for that new release next week. And I'm not going to lie, friends, I'm excited about the next release. I know I say that every month, but I'm really excited. Again, my set that's coming out is something different, a little bit different from me. And I think you're going to love it. Okay. I'm sending you into the weekend to craft your joy. I know it's only Thursday, but let's pretend it's Friday and we're heading into the weekend. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions. Take a look. If you're at all interested in being on my email list, that information is down below in the description. Also, I'd love to see you over in my free community at craftyourjoy.com. And I have a whole bunch of watercolor classes over there and a $5 off coupon listed below. Okay, friends, thanks so much for joining me. I will see you next week. And yeah, I'm just so excited. We had so much fun together. I can't wait to see what you create. If you post it in social media, please tag me. Okay, friends, I see everybody just saying goodbye. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time, friends. Bye now.